Welcome to the 27 presented by The Critic. We are the world's first and only student-teacher podcast on the MCU. Today we have two juniors joining us to talk all things Spider-Man. We have Brynna, we have Evan. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good.
Pretty good.
You are both my students, same band as well.
Yes.
How's A-Push going so far?
I'd say it's pretty good.
I still have to turn in my annotations. I'm sorry about that.
You know, it happens. It happens. We're flexible with deadlines. How's junior year? It's a big year within the 4 years of high school.
I think that mandatory meeting kind of was like a reality check.
I didn't go to it. I don't know if I can say that on camera. But it's because I had fawn and then I had this and I needed to get food.
Oh, that's true.
Mandatory. This is very important. Mandatory.
I had my friends tell me what we're
Yeah.
doing. I
What
got the
was
information.
Was this like college stuff?
It was like
and
college
like
stuff, like
being all
you know,
grown
like
up now?
being ready for senior year.
I mean, it's right around the corner. It will
No,
come.
don't say
It
that.
is.
Don't say that.
It
Don't say that.
is.
Don't say that.
I said to one of my classes today, like, when we come back from midwinter break, at least in A-Push world, we're like 2 months away from the test,
Yeah.
which means we're then like 3 months away from the end of school, which means we're 3 months away from you being seniors.
College search.
The summer's going to suck.
Just the silence connected with that
Yeah.
says enough. So we are here to talk all things Spider-Man, right? We have 3 sets of movies we could talk about. Brynna, tell us a little bit before we start recording. You mentioned that you have a history with the comics.
I have read some of the Spider-Man comics. I don't want to say all because there's a lot of the original comics. And there's a trillion different... It's so hard to keep up with Marvel because there's like a trillion different storylines and different characters. But I think that... Am I allowed to state my opinion now?
Sure.
Start the conversation now. I think that the Tobey Maguire movies are the most comically accurate. If we're thinking like original Spider-Man and like Green Goblin and Sandman, like it hits all of those villains, and I think it does it in the most accurate way with like their character and their storyline.
I mean, for Green Goblin, especially in that movie, it was pretty good to see the split personality of just like the Green Goblin and the regular
And Osborn.
Yeah.
And also, just like side note to that is like Willem Dafoe's such a great actor on top of it that,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
he's
true,
great
yeah.
in everything. I wonder, you could have an advantage and a disadvantage of being the first, right? Where the first you could try to be the most accurate, but also like anytime there's the first of anything, like it can always be refined. It's like the first draft of doing an essay or something. May not be your best work, but you're saying it's most accurate in terms of what you've read in the comic books.
Yes, and I think that a lot of it is because it was the first Spider-Man movies to come out, so there wasn't anything else to base it off of. Like, if we're thinking about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies, like The Amazing Spider-Man, they're accurate, but not as much. And they couldn't, they can't redo Dr. Octavius, and they can't redo Green Goblin, they can't redo Sandman the way that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man did. And they did redo Green Goblin, but I think in like a worse...
And they did it where
Right.
like his son
his
was
son.
like,
Like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
not, it wasn't like the injection of like whatever the serum was, and then the split personality. It
Yeah.
was like he had like a virus or something.
Yeah, and even that was worse because in the Tobey Maguire ones, I believe in the third Spider-Man,
Yeah.
there's his son Henry turning into Green Goblin.
Yeah.
And that's like, it's all for like vengeance, and it's really tense and it's really emotional at the end. And it's the first time that in the Tobey Maguire franchise we kind of see this like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man franchise, we see the that's the first time that I actually felt like emotion towards the characters in a way that I didn't feel like. I feel like they just randomly inserted Green Goblin in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, and then when we're moving on to the Tom Holland movies, well, Green Goblin has already been done twice, so,
Yeah.
Also the fact that that's part of the MCU, so they had to integrate that into everything, so they were just a lot different. Like, they kept on getting more and more... They kept straying away from the original plot.
And I think for Tom Holland Spider-Man, there's not many comic accurate like Spider-Man comic accurate villains in that besides Spider-Man No Way Home. That was, or was it? Yeah, it was Spider-Man No Way Home, right? Like when Green Goblin, Doctor.
When they all come back,
they
yeah.
all come back. That's because they're coming from all the other movies. But when we look at it in like the perspective of like the whole MCU as a whole, it's going to be hard to incorporate those. They want to incorporate his villains.
Yeah.
In that universe, it's going to be actually more difficult now without that whole like multiverse and all that like just combining with each other.
Well, and that's like the multiverse is always like the cheat almost, where like you can just get anything into it and kind of save yourself that way. Let's just talk about it because I have strong opinions, Evan. We talked about this when you arrived. I think the Andrew Garfield, I only watched the first one. I will actually not watch the second one because the first one stunk. It was like the same movie.
Mm-hmm.
So Tobey Maguire, that one came out in like 2002. I think the first Andrew Garfield was maybe 08 or 10 or somewhere around there. It was within, say, like 10 years, right? It's the same movie, right? Like in terms of like, now granted, like an origin story is an origin story, but like why rehash the same origin story into it in such a short time? And I think the biggest issue is like the background of why that movie was made, like the licensing deal that like Sony would lose the rights to the movie if they didn't make one essentially every 5 years. So they just churned it out so they could keep the cash cow coming.
It was rushed. I think that movie specifically was really rushed, especially because of that licensing deal in itself.
Are you saying rushed like the production of it? Because like the story feels super rushed too. Like everything in that movie is just like bang, 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 bang.
That story was definitely rushed, and I feel like the plot overall was rushed.
Yeah.
Because I feel that they definitely could have better executed Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I feel because if you watch the second one, I feel like there could have been his Spider-Man was very emotional at the end. Which was the crazy part.
Yeah.
And when I always look at the deleted scenes from like Spider-Man movies, see what could have been, right? So when I look at the deleted scenes and whatnot, I hate the fact that they like try and incorporate this like backstory to his parents and everything.
Yes.
Which is
it's a little bit more like mysterious, or like they're involved with like Oscorp and like the secrets.
But then they do that. They do like the parents' backstory. They do his own like deals with like his relationship, and then they also do like 2 villains per movie, and it's a lot to. How long are they? Like 2.5 hours, I think, or 2 hours. It's just a lot to fit in, and it doesn't. Yeah, like what you said, they licensing rights.
I did the watching the first one made me not want to watch the second one, but then when I watched, so I did like watch the recap on YouTube to prepare for this, and I'm sorry, seeing that Electro becomes a villain when he falls into a tub of electric eels, like
after he's
really
like a loser, and it shows him like on the elevator in like a button up, and then he comes out like super jacked, and he's like, rah.
I don't remember comically how Electro became Electro. I don't actually remember, but all I know is that was a little bit of a stupid way to like actually make Electro. I'm pretty sure they could have been a little more creative. I feel like he was still a pretty good villain overall. I feel like he had potential.
Yeah.
But bringing him back into No Way Home was very confusing to me. When I first saw the trailer,
I forgot that he was in No Way Home. Yeah.
And when I first saw him in there, I'm like, how are they gonna bring him back? He basically died in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
And then I see the whole flashback of like they brought them back.
They saved him the moment he was gonna
die. The moment he was going into the grid or something like that.
Also the giant lizard, because they couldn't really do Oscorp Green Goblins, they did Oscorp Lizard. And they make fun of that in No Way Home too. They're like, you wanted to turn everybody into a giant lizard? Seriously? Like, how is that? And he's like, lizards are superior.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but when you actually watch the movies, like, it was so intense, or they tried to make it so intense and so serious, and it's like, the CGI was also terrible, but like, he's a giant lizard.
Yeah.
It was not as good.
No. But I mean, within these, even when I wrote down like who I thought the better villains were, the lizard was kind of more towards the middle of mine.
I feel like he was a pretty good villain, actually. I feel like his character was like on point, where like, everyone needs to be this because I'm superior, this and that, like an actual villain. And like with Electro, he was just like, I need power.
Yeah.
That's it. Like he's like basically like an iPhone who needs power and needs battery at that point.
Yeah, the visuals are really cool though. Like that scene when it's like that slow mo. You didn't watch it.
No, I did not watch it.
But there's a
I'll
really
have to take your word for it.
There's a really good slow motion shot of like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I don't even know how to describe it. Just like bending through like all of this like electricity that's being shot at him, and it's a really cool
Matrix
shot.
style.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of. So I'll give The Amazing Spider-Man that. They had really good. It had better cinematography.
What'd you think of the first one? They did a lot of like first-person point of view, like the swinging on the web from his perspective.
That as a kid When I was
Yeah.
I remember watching this movie in theaters. I remember being there with my mom watching this. So seeing that as a kid, like him like going like this on
Yeah.
like skyscrapers and everything, and me thinking it's like so realistic, not knowing it was really bad CGI.
Yeah.
I think that it was pretty cool actually. Maybe not so much first person point of view, but I think like just a little bit of it is a nice incorporation of it.
Yeah.
Have you ever played the Spider-Man video game?
Yes, I
Yeah.
can't wait for that to be in the new Into the Multiverse.
Yeah,
Which
that's
one?
what that scene, like when I saw that, like the video, there was like a video game where you could like actually do it. I like played that for days. It was so much fun.
Well, even just like the toys, like my kids, like getting toys for my kids, just even any type of thing where you can like, even with silly string, where you can
Yeah.
like actually
Did you
like
have-
flick your wrist.
Did
and
you get them the Spider-Man doll, the action figure that actually shoots?
No.
webs? I had that.
Mm.
I would shoot it everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
That's I'll have to
So
check
yeah,
that
so I
one
did
out.
like that when I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I really liked about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was so in the comics, I know that Spider-Man's more of like he's always a jokester. Actually, whenever he's like playing like fighting villains, he always makes jokes. And I noticed that about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. He was always making jokes, like with Electro. Actually, he was always doing that, especially when you first met him. He was like always making jokes around, toying around with him, basically.
Yeah.
And that's something that's like my favorite attribute to Spider-Man, and how he can like do all that those little serious situations with the villains and like joke around with them, sort of like Deadpool as well at the same time.
Yeah. A little comic relief, break the
Yeah.
tension. It was interesting that you used the word emotional to describe Andrew Garfield, because I had seen No Way Home before I'd ever seen these ones, his movies, and that's what I took out of No Way Home, is that I called him emo Spider-Man. He really like was very much in his emotions. I'm guessing from the death of
His
Gwen.
girlfriend, yep.
No, yeah, Gwen.
Yeah, it was Gwen.
Yeah. I have that with the Wait, did you just say? Were you talking about Amazing Spider-Man, or you were saying No Way Home?
From seeing him in like
seeing
Andrew
Andrew-
Garfield
yeah.
Spider-Man
Yeah.
in No Way Home is very emotional. Like he's a very like that was how I kind of saw him and described him.
I feel like you also see that in Peter Parker's Tom Holland's Spider-Man when he's playing Spider-Man versus when he's playing Peter Parker, because he also kind of does that. He does the jokes. He does like, because he's a teenager, he's a kid,
Yeah.
he's not really taking it very seriously, so he does that. But at the same time, I think he does a really good job with Peter Parker in a way that Andrew Garfield didn't. So Andrew Garfield was a really good Spider-Man in the way that Tobey Maguire wouldn't make. He didn't have that same kind of wit.
Yeah, he was very
and, like, kind of charm.
serious.
He was very serious, and he wasn't the best actor, so
Yeah.
it was hard to like rewatching them as someone who's like older and has seen just more films, is just like, oh, he's just not as
Yeah.
it's hard to take him seriously in a way that with Andrew Garfield he's less serious and more of a comic relief like Spider-Man is supposed to be, but everyone always says this, but he's too cool. He skateboards and he's attractive and he knows how to talk to like women when he's like flirting with Gwen, and it's like, yeah, that's like fun, and I know that's why so many teenage girls like the Amazing Spider-Man's better, but he's just not the best Peter Parker, because Peter Parker is supposed to be like a nerd and awkward, and they don't really play into that. He's more like he's like a cool nerd, like he does it all.
So-
And that's not really Peter Parker.
So when trying to figure this out, in my notes it's best Spider-Man, but maybe it's best Peter Parker. I went back and I watched an interview with Stan Lee from 1977, and the quote when talking about Peter Parker and Spider-Man, he's pretty good at catching bad guys, but he's apt to get an allergy attack while he's fighting. He worries about dandruff. He'll have an ingrown toenail. He'll tear his costume. His Aunt May won't let him go out to save the world because he's not wearing his galoshes and it's snowing out. And I think that's
Yeah.
not Andrew Garfield, right? He is
Andrew
like kind of
Garfield.
like the too cool.
Yeah, I remember there was one scene that made me laugh hilariously, which was like in the Amazing Spider-Man, where he had his Spider-Man costume, but it was like how we are bundled up in New York, how we have all our coats and stuff like
Yeah.
that. That was basically him, because he had allergies and all that other stuff. So that was like pretty funny to me, because I was like, oh, okay, so he's weak sometimes to allergies.
So you need some relatability with your.
Yeah.
Well, although
Yeah.
as I say that though, like, how relatable do superheroes need to be? Like,
A little bit.
it's like that kind of in between. I want to say yes, but at the same time, though, these like the
like
the
that
people who are
middle
going to
ground.
save the world. But I don't know. What do you think, Brynna?
I mean, I think it depends on what your character is and who your superhero is. I think in the sense of like him being Spider-Man, a big part of his identity that he deals with that you don't see with other superheroes as frequently is the fact that he has to conceal his identity. And I know secret identity is a very common thing, but if we're looking at like, I don't know, if we're looking at Tom Holland Spider-Man in the MCU, the entire world knows these like full-grown adults and what their identities are, but he's a child. And you know, we see in No Way Home when he does have his identity revealed, people die because of it, and it's really emotional. That's the first time we kind of see this like trauma inflicted on Spider-Man, which I think in the previous movies he is more relatable. You know, he's from New York, and he's from, I mean, I live in Forest Hills, and he's from Forest Hills, and that's super cool. And I think that, you know, to an extent, children do want to see themselves in superheroes, especially when you're like awkward and you're kind of nerdy and you like science or something, and then you see like this superhero who's like a genius and like totally recreates himself and like saves the world because he's so smart, and like people praise him for that. I think that's something that's really important to have as a kid, and have when like you maybe feel ostracized for your interest, the way that people just project onto fictional characters, like people will project onto superheroes sometimes. So I think especially since because he's younger, that's maybe an aspect that we shouldn't really prioritize in a character, but is important if we're like trying to reach a certain audience, so like children. And that's why I think punchline, this is why I think Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man, because he's the best Spider-Man and he's the best Peter Parker, because he has all of those aspects. He's funny, he's witty, and at the same time he's awkward, he's not really sure how he fits in, he has like one friend, and he also has character development throughout the movies.
Honestly, I'm heavily reconsidering my choices here. Maybe Tom Holland.
So we do. We listen, we grow, our opinions develop.
And I also think like a big part of people, like who they prefer as a Spider-Man. I know I've had this debate with my friend. She loves Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. I like the Tobey Maguire movies, but I hate Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. But it's because the first Spider-Man movies that she saw were the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. The first Spider-Man movies that I saw were the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, because I was super into the MCU before I was really into Spider-Man. So I kind of, like, Tom Holland Spider-Man and those movies was, like, my first kind of, that was just my first, like, exposure to Spider-Man. So that's the one that I kind of, like, attached onto.
I agree with a lot of what you said, especially, like, what you were talking about the relatability of, you know, the teenager. And to me, that's what makes Tom Holland the best, is that, like, he's such a good teenager, and the idea of, like, I don't know if it's just being a teacher and working in schools for a long time, but like his vulnerability of like being like dropped into this thing while being so young. That's what I always just think about, even here with a lot of our students. Like, you do a lot of great work and you all are so smart, but at the end of the day, like, you're young, you're still trying to like figure out the world. He has to do all that while having these powers, and then getting pulled into the Avengers and the MCU, and
then having his identity revealed to the whole world at the same time.
Which I made a separate list. I could only think of two. I tried to think of the best individual scenes of these movies, and for me, that was the second best one. The end of Far From Home, when his identity is revealed, there's like everything seems to be coming together, and he has MJ, and then all of a sudden, like, the whole thing gets blown up, and like that's the end of the movie.
I remember watching that and the movie theater like exploding. Like, I actually remember, I was like, oh my god, I
because no one expected that.
That was wild.
But I know that I think Mysterio would always. I think he has done that in the comics, if I'm correct. He does.
I haven't read him with Mysterio.
That saved me. Out of the three Tom Holland ones, that's the one I like the least, because I don't know, Mysterio and
Mysterio is technically like that in the comics. He is technically a trickster. He is an illusionist. He doesn't use drones in the comics.
It's so funny. I feel like that's where my lack of knowledge on the comics probably hurts, because I just see this like when I'm like looking at villains, like he wasn't one that resonates. Same with, to me, the weakness of the Tom Holland movies are the villains. Like, Vulture doesn't really do much for me either. He's scary. Like when he kind of reveals himself, like when they're driving to the prom or whatever it is, and like that, like, reality is like, oh, he's gonna kill him. Like, he's like very like menacing with that.
And especially that scene where he was under all that rubble. That was like that was also emotional for him, because that was him like actually be like, he had to lift all that up, and I could see like the emotion that he had as a teenager.
Yeah.
Like, he was saying, help me. Like, Spider-Man never asked for help. Let's be honest. I don't remember you guys ever hearing Spider-Man in any of the movies saying help or something like that under a piece of rubble. So, you know, that was like really surprising to me in the first movie. And I think in No Way Home, when he was fighting Green Goblin, that was like the first time, like, well, besides maybe Tobey Maguire when he killed the murderer of his Uncle Ben, but seeing Tom Holland fighting Green Goblin, like, that scene was really intense, because it was like Green Goblin basically just saying, "Come and hit me already," and he was like, "I'm gonna kill you. Like this is it. I'm so pissed off. I'm already done with you."
Mm.
And I think you kind of see that progression, that character progression in the Tom Holland movies that you don't really see in the Spider-Man movies. Because I feel like in the Tobey Maguire and the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, they were less, I want to say they were less planned. The way that Tom Holland Spider-Man movies are part of the MCU, so they were planned for like probably like I don't even know how many years in advance.
Yeah.
Because it's like such a complicated franchise and they have so much to incorporate. So you see a definite progression in his kind of trauma with being a superhero and also a teenager, because like in the first movie, right, like first it's like, oh, he can't date this girl that he really likes.
Yeah.
Right? That should be part of the normal experience. And then it's like, oh my gosh, and her dad is trying to kill me, and this is just, an experience that I miss out on. And while, it wasn't particularly someone that he cared for, her dad, it's still like his girlfriend's dad that he has to like fight and almost stab him and arrest. And then we see like it kind of gets a little progressively worse in like the next movie where, he loses Tony Stark, who's like his father figure, and it's very, very sad, and we see that. And then he kind of latches on, in a sense, to this next male figure who comes into his life and sort of is like, I will help you, I'll help guide you. And then he gets betrayed by him.
And he deceives him,
And he ruins his life, basically, for the entirety of No Way Home. And then we get to No Way Home, and then he loses his actual, like, his Aunt May, who's, like, actually his mom. And then we see the way that kind of eventually breaks him in that scene where he's fighting and almost kills Green Goblin. That was so good.
That was
the
intense.
way that the other Spider-Man stopped. It was so good.
They looked at him like, this is something we knew we were gonna do.
Because they're adults now, and he's still a kid.
Yeah.
Which was crazy because they are seeing the way that and they talk about this in No Way Home too, but the way that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was kind of like, oh, I lost my Uncle Ben, and Andrew Garfield's like, well, I lost Gwen, and now he's lost May, and now they're able to guide him through that experience with, not killing Green Goblin.
Not killing the villains that did what they did to them, to those characters specifically.
Yeah.
But seeing that, like, affect him was intense, especially seeing that in the movie theater. That was really, really intense.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like we've covered a lot of bases here. I feel like our overall theme, if I were to summarize this, I think we end up, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're kind of putting, overall, we're dropping the Tom Holland movies towards the top.
Yes.
Toby in the middle. Well, don't even talk too much. So, like, I would shout out, like, often when we talk about the MCU, there's a lot with, like, oh, Iron Man was, like, the first one. And within the MCU, yes. But, like, the release of Spider-Man in 2002 was, like, a stepping stone, an introduction, like, from when I was growing up, there were none of these movies. And then, like, the Michael Keaton Batman came out at the end of the 80s. Those totally fell apart into the 90s because those movies were pretty bad by the end. And then you're talking about, 5-7 years. It's the reason why, like, Marvel had licensed these movies out to Sony, was that, like, no one was making these movies. So might as well, hey, they're going to give us this money to go make a movie, go and do it. So when 2002, Tobey Maguire comes out, it is, like, this, birth of what will eventually get to the MCU. So I think we can, give Tobey Maguire in that franchise some respect. I think they do get progressively worse, those movies, from 1 to 3.
I'll say it that the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 were not the best. They're low tier.
They were not. I'm glad you came to your senses.
I've come to my senses.
Now, I was very wary coming in because, like, I feel like even our wonderful producer Irene is, I think, big Andrew Garfield support. I feel like from talking with students leading up to this, that I thought I was expecting a lot of pushback on my Andrew Garfield hate, but I don't know. If we moved you, Evan, maybe, you know what? Maybe my concession, Evan, will be that I will go and watch The Amazing Spider-Man, which, by the way, I have to go, like, rent it on Prime or something. There's, like,
really?
It's not streaming. I have to go rent the other one.
I mean, you should. It's still Spider-Man, so it's still fun.
It's still Spider-Man movie.
And it's good,
Dude,
and it's sad at
him
the end.
falling into those eels. It was just like,
Well,
that's how he was
green.
green.
You can laugh at that.
You can
That
laugh
can
at it
be
because
comedy.
he was saying happy birthday to himself as well. Like he was.
Oh, stop! I forgot about that. That was
yeah.
so sad.
He was
I
saying
felt so
happy
bad for
birthday to
him.
himself, and then when he clicked the wire, he fell. He electrocuted himself with it, and then he fell.
I just remember feeling bad for him about that. Like, it was
Yeah.
stupid, and I also felt bad for him, so it wasn't funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I might be triggered that, people who wear button-down shirts and glasses are nerds. I don't know. I might, but maybe that's just a me problem. So I think we end up there. Anything else before we go?
Oh, yeah, I saw No Way Home, I think, 5 or something times.
Wow.
I don't know. Irene would remember better because, when it first came out, I went and saw it with, her and somebody else for, I think that was my 4th time seeing it.
Wow.
And I just remember also just for, a comment on why I think the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies are better. The theater was crazy, especially the first night I saw it. It was insane. And it was definitely a movie for people that had seen the other Spider-Mans.
Yeah.
And that's what made it such a good Spider-Man. But that was such a way to just be the most recent Spider-Man movie to come out. Just combining all of it into one universe. Just that one movie alone, I think, was better, in my opinion, than all of the other Spider-Man movies that had been made.
I saw No Way Home opening night. Well, not opening night. I saw it premiere night. My mom got tickets to premiere night and IMAX. So seeing that, and then I'm like, and then remember, so Andrew Garfield's the first Spider-Man I've seen. Tobey Maguire I saw on TV cable, maybe a couple years after the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, but seeing Andrew Garfield, that was my first Spider-Man. So I'm like, oh my god, there's no way this is happening right now.
Yeah.
I know that the internet was basically saying, hey, they're gonna come back, but I'm like, I just
still experience
the photos of them on set together.
Yeah.
It's this is happening. It's called No Way Home, and there's
yeah.
Well, then even to the theater experience, there's a momentum of that live theater experience watching these movies that happened probably maybe before, but Endgame, just living on YouTube of just the crowd reactions of what the theaters are like in Endgame, and then with this one as well.
Yeah.
From never having seen these movies and catching up over a year, I've yet to have that experience. Maybe we'll have it someday.
It's the best, especially when the Marvel movie's so good. People have been anticipating it for so long because Marvel fans are really. I mean, I'm a Marvel fan, and we're crazy.
But even looking at that, I don't want to say is that dead, but is there anything coming down the pike that will have that
We have Secret Wars, Avengers Secret. We have.
Yeah, that's gonna be really exciting.
That's gonna be really good.
Yeah, Marvel has been really bad recently. Honestly, the best thing
Phase
that came
4
out was.
Yikes! Phase 4 was not that good.
Black Panther is carrying it, honestly.
Black Panther was.
That's really all they have left. Not all they have left, but that's coming out. I liked Moon Knight. I liked the show.
Really good. I don't think Moon Knight was very relevant, or maybe I just don't know the. I don't know the backstory. For why that's gonna incorporate it, but I just felt like it was kind of random.
And it is very much like a standalone type thing. You almost could have no knowledge of the MCU and just watch that. And
I think Loki was good. Loki was really good, and it's actually.
I disagree with you.
I haven't watched that yet. That's our next season.
Loki is the integration into Ant-Man, the new Ant-Man movie coming out.
Yeah.
So you have to watch Loki before you see.
Oh, interesting.
Because it everything leads up. Because Loki is connected to Spider-Man actually. So all the events of Spider-Man connect to Loki. Loki connects to Ant-Man, and Ant-Man connects to the rest of Phase 5.
Okay.
That's a bummer because I don't like Ant-Man.
I know, but because Kang is actually a really relevant.
I just learned about Kang. There was a student tell me, a senior we had on the podcast last year was running through Kang for me. Seems pretty.
He's a really intense.
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty intense. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Well, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. We're the 27. You can find us on Instagram at the 27THHS. You can find us on Spotify, Apple. If you're listening to this, you already have. You can find us on the Classic YouTube channel. We're looking for an editor. We lost our film editor. We don't have our editor anymore. So we will be, if you're out there, if you're one of the 7 people who listen to this and you are proficient at film editing, let us know. So you can find us there, though. We have a bunch of old episodes up there. Thank you to Irene, our wonderful producer, for doing our work for us, and to you for joining us. We'll be back. We're taking a little bit of a break with winter break coming up, and then we'll be back with Loki. Loki is the next show we're doing, so this will be interesting. I will be sure to check in with the two of you as a lover and a hater of Loki.
Not a hater, just not as much of an enjoyer.
Not an average enjoyer of Loki. I think Loki's
I'm an average enjoyer. Not really.
He's fun. He's fun.
He's fun.
He's a fun character.
We can agree, and we'll leave it at that.
Loki.
We can start with that. Okay, well, thank you very much. We will see everyone next time on the 27. Take care.